This video is powered by the pros at Pascal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPascal.com.
Your Atlanta Braves hosting the Phillies. What do we think about that matchup with Bryce Harper and company coming into Atlanta?
Ty, I really appreciate you giving me an opportunity, but I'm not going to hex anything. Good luck to the Braves. You know, we did a big deal overhauling the Mets and getting this bye and avoiding the Dodgers in the second round. So all that was good, but the Phillies are a tough opponent.
Is that the number one fan base, Tommy, outside of the Cardinals that listens to our show? Or is it Cubs at 2? Who's the second
what part
best?
of the state you're in. I mean, we grew up Braves fans because of TBS, but it would probably be Cardinals, and I think probably either Braves or Cubs would be 2 and 3, despite what some would tell you about the Royals or Rangers.
That game's at 12 o'clock later on today. I know Tom is going to be invested, as other fans will be, in the MLB playoffs. But good luck today, Tom. Excited about that. But let's talk a little KJ Jefferson. It looks like he's back. What does he do for this football team heading into Provo this week?
Yeah, well, think about it. Razorback fans are frustrated, and I get it. You know, the short yardage conversions that were denied them. It's happened in some other games too. You know, the fumble at the goal line and by Rocket against Missouri State, the fumble at the 3 by KJ. It's just been a little bit of a weird phenomenon this year. They've had that going on, and then obviously they're down so many men in the secondary, and then the 2 Johnsons go out, and you know those are 2 of your biggest contributors at this point. And so now Trent Gordon was playing, Hudson Clark's playing safety, and Sam Pittman made a little bit of a I don't know if it was a joke, but a comment about him. I'm not sure he's fitted and suited to fill the A gap. And you know, on one of Dylan Johnson's touchdown runs, Clark was there, right there in the gap, but Johnson had a head of steam and kind of barreled him over and ran for the touchdown. You know, I mentioned last week I like those 2 backs, Dylan Johnson, Joquavius Marks, and Mississippi State just had Arkansas schemed up really well on what they were going to do defensively. But KJ, if he's in the game, you know, those and 1 conversions, you can sneak them. And, you know, Hornsby's not as big of a guy. And Fortin maybe doesn't have the experience of trying to do a 1-yard sneak. And so they were doing some things that looked to me a little bit slow developing. There was a 4th and 1, I think, early in the second quarter with A.J. Green. They were on about their 10. It was after Mississippi State pinned them, and the backside guy just crashed through and nailed A.J. Green. And the other plays, you know, they tried a couple of boots, you know, passes, and those didn't work. And I tell you, if they pick off 1 or 2 of those tipped balls and they stick in both of those goal to goes or, you know, inside the 10 situation, it's a completely different game. Mm-hmm. And so I think having KJ, it just opens up your playbook more. The quarterback runs are more powerful. He's a fall ahead for another yard kind of guy, and I think they would have stuck those in. But I think Arkansas did the right thing, not playing him in that game. Yeah, it's frustrating to lose 3 in a row, but this team has been beset with adversity, unlike last year's. You think fans are upset because it was a 9-4 season. You think you're going to build on that. And these injuries you could not have foreseen, and it's really affected the secondary play. And obviously when you don't have your number 1 quarterback, it's a different scenario.
So let's talk about that secondary. There was a lot of calls and reaction about Arkansas's approach and whether they should have rushed more players and blitzed more and put more heat on Will Rogers. That comes at a cost too, Tom, with having fewer defenders. What do you think Barry Odom's options are when it comes to strategy and how many you should rush, considering where he's at personnel-wise with the secondary?
Well, I think generally they felt with the Mississippi State game, they went back a lot to their double cloud, and because it had been successful for them. And their thought was if they bring 5 guys, then Rogers is just going to identify the mismatches, and you know they have enough routes in their route tree to – and then the checks at the line is say, okay, this is going to be a pressure call. A guy's going to get open, and as Sam Pittman said, he'll pick us apart. And they feel the same about Jaron Hall. Now, he's a little bit dinged up, the BYU quarterback, and I just don't think they have really good receivers. I watched some of their game against Utah State, and they have some dynamic guys. I can't name you all the names right now, but they have a good set of receivers, but I don't think the whole package is there, like the big physical O-line, the number of really good receivers. And I think they're going to get after Hall a lot more than they did Rodgers and see if they can get some balls thrown into traffic, balls thrown under pressure that you can create some havoc with. And look, those weren't easy picks. You know, I think the one Sanders hit him and like one of his arms was pinned and stuff like that, but it hit him high in the chest. Hudson Clark had a chance to jump over a guy and get a pick. One of the touchdowns, Malik Chavis was right there, and it just kind of tipped off his hand. So a lot of opportunities in that game, and maybe if they cash in on some of those, it could be difference makers against BYU.
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier, that, you know, for those that want to question strategy and Barry Odom, and it's easy to do from your recliner as being an armchair coordinator, I guess, in this case, you look at all the opportunities Arkansas had to intercept footballs in the game. 4 or 5 occasions, the players dropped it. I mean, at some point, it can't just be about the coaching. The players have to make the plays.
Yeah, they do. And like I said, some of those were tough ones, but, you know, they're hitting you on the hands on a couple of occasions. And I know there was a tip pass on a slant. It was just up there. And that one, it didn't look like anybody was close enough, but that's kind of indicative of there were some balls in the air, and Arkansas just did not get them. And let's just say they stopped 2 of those drives or stop a 4th down or 2. It's just a different ball game. They're in it late. But, you know, it felt to me kind of like Arkansas did at home against some teams last year where they just kind of, or this year with South Carolina, they just jump on you early. They've got all the momentum, and then you're fighting back. And that's what Mississippi State did to Arkansas. And when your number 1 quarterback's out, it's just hard to, like, create that energy and that confidence. And even though Malik Hornsby gave them a spark, use a Dennis Green line on you here. Malik Hornsby was who we thought he was going to be. Dynamic, explosive. He even dropped some deep balls in. The Bryce Stevens touchdown was phenomenal throw and catch. But under pressure, he put the ball in harm's way a couple times. So Cade Fortin was the ball security more guy, and then Hornsby was the more electric, but ball could be in trouble guy, and that proved to be the case.
Would you agree this team's been out of sorts since that Missouri State game? They really obviously didn't play a complete game then, and really haven't put a consistent 4-quarter effort together in a while. What's it going to take this week at BYU? What has to come together for that to happen, to have a 4-quarter performance?
Yeah, well, right now I think they're upside down in turnovers by 1, and so early in the year they were like +4 or +5 after 2 games, one of the best in the country. And that's turned on them because they're not forcing any. So they got to win that battle more. You know, I think, look, I don't want to dump on the freshman punter, Max Fletcher, because I think he's going to wind up being good. But he was struggling with his first punt of games. And also, like, just the yards when you're trying to punt inside the 20 and it lands on, like, the 17 and then bounces forward. You know, you saw Mississippi State's punter did a perfect pin punt down to the 1. And they end up scoring on the next possession after that. So they've got to get better special teams play. They've got to stay on the field better, and that's converting all those short yardage situations. They've just got to come up with some stuff. Maybe they go to the edge a little more, as Sam Pittman suggested yesterday. Their O-line has to deliver. I think their O-line really underperformed in that game against Mississippi State. They were beaten at the point of attack a lot. So all those things, and they have to deal with the altitude and the fans at BYU. And I think they'll have a fine chance to win this game.
Coach Pittman was talking about the backside. That's what they were getting them on a lot of times with the offensive line. So on that subject, do you feel like the offensive line has underperformed through 6 games, Tom?
Well, they have in a couple of situations. They did last week. But some other games like South Carolina, they were on time and creating holes and gaps for Rocket for the big game he had. So it's just been a hit and miss. I mean, I think in general, halfway through the season, you say they haven't been as dominant as you expected them to be. There's some things going on. You know, we know Stromberg got dinged up, hurt his arm or something. He had a bad blocking grade last week. And there's been a few penalties. So, yeah, I would say on the whole, they haven't delivered as well as we thought. And honestly, coming out of camp, the receivers, you know, we felt like the receiving core was going to be pretty good. But after a couple of good games to start, Matt Landers has not been targeted as much lately. And it's a combination of everything. How much time the quarterbacks have to pass. Are the receivers beating their guys? And those kind of things. How connected the quarterbacks and receivers are to adjustments on routes. And so Hazelwood was kind of there last week, and Bryce Stevens jumped up. But they've just got to have more consistent efforts from Landers and Warren Thompson, who I know has been dinged up. But, you know, they're a fumble at the 3-yard line against Texas A&M away from being 4-2, and fans would be in a different frame of mind.
How much does this team miss Traylon Burks, Tom?
Yeah, they do. There's no question. Just I think KJ felt really comfortable on 50-50 balls, just putting it in his neighborhood. Maybe not the same exact deal with these guys, but they've got to force some stuff to Matt Landers because he's that kind of guy. I mean, he's a speed guy, and in the first 3 games, he was their main target. And so they've got to get back to throwing to him. You know, Trey Knox has got to be more involved. We know there's got a lot of playmakers, but they've got to be able to stay on the field a little better and kind of feed those guys.
Yeah. So altitude, that's been brought up a couple times on the show. Do you think that's much of a factor? If so, how do you acclimate or change or train for that in a week's time to adjust to the altitude in Provo, which is roughly 4,500 feet?
Right. Yeah, the biggest thing I believe is just hydrating. And Matt Jones with Whole Hog Sports, he and I were talking yesterday, and he's had some conversations with dudes who played on the 2018 Razorback team. And bottom line was they felt like it really wasn't that much of a factor. Now, I don't know the science or of sickle cell anemia guys, but those guys, they've got to really watch out what they do, I guess, in terms of diet and hydration, and just be on the lookout. Because I don't know what altitude does there, but Sam Pittman mentioned it yesterday, so I will today, that you just have to be really aware of how you prepare those guys, and then, but otherwise, I think if you're doing long-term stamina things, I think it might have more an impact. But if you go hard for 7 or 8 seconds, and then there's breaks in the game and all, I just don't think it's that big of a factor.
And you're not playing it at Pikes Peak. It's sitting at 12,000 feet. This is at 4,500 feet. Fayetteville's roughly 1,400 feet. It's about a 3,000-foot difference in elevation. I mean, it's not nothing, but it's not the factor that I think some fear it may be.
Right, and when they went to Colorado State, I talked to Steve Atwater, who played for the Denver Broncos, who played a lot of games at altitude, and he said, look, in the fourth quarter, maybe it can be. Maybe if you're super hyped to start a game, you expend a lot of emotional energy, and then later in the game, it could affect you. But again, the guys who played in 18 turned out it wasn't a super huge factor, and so I think the 2,000 feet difference between those two venues, I just don't see it being something you could say, boy, that's a huge benefit to BYU.
Tom Murphy with us, Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, Whole Hog Sports. Tom, last year this team lost 3 straight and then pounded UAPB. They don't get that same opponent this year when they travel to Provo. Based on your conversations with Sam Pittman and these players, do you expect this team to turn it around with KJ back this weekend?
I expect they'll have a lot better effort. The ball security part needs to happen. I think they also feel like I think the game plan last week was, look, our run game can do something. And they ran for 200 and something yards. It's just that they got behind early. So if they win the coin toss, they might take the ball first to try to get on the board. It just kind of changes the feel of a game if you're in the lead, if you score with your first possession. So that'll be an emphasis. And I do believe their mojo will be better. The deal is they've got to find ways to just create a third down stop, tip a ball and intercept it, and get a few possessions away from BYU, because if BYU is consistent and efficient, they have a chance to move the ball down the field against some inexperienced DBs. So they just got to mix things up, get a little pressure on Darren Hall, and roll the dice and see if they can win one.
All right, last one. We'll get you out of here on this. What would be the added value of winning going into a bye? What's that do for your approach and your mindset, knowing Auburn's on the back end, but having a W that breaks a 3-game losing streak headed into a week off?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty big deal psychologically. You've got 2 weeks of positive vibes. You know, it's always easier to correct off of wins. I saw somebody talking on, it might have been whoever the color analyst was last night. It's so much easier. You win a game to correct off of that. Yeah, it would be a big deal. You're above 500 instead of below 500. Who knows what's happening? Does Auburn have a press conference today? Did I see that? I mean, there could be wild stuff going on at Auburn when the Razorbacks get down there. So, I think it would be a huge deal.
The rumor mill's certainly working overtime down on the plains.
Football is back, and BetOnline remains your #1 source for all your football betting needs this season. You'll find the latest odds, matchup info, player news, and game trends. And as your continued source for all sports wagering info, BetOnline features live betting, free contests, live scores, and giveaways all season long. Always the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports and events like MLB, MMA, tennis, boxing, and even golf. Head to betonline.ag to join and receive your 100% welcome bonus with your first deposit. Make sure to use the promo code BELIEVE to receive your rewards. That's BLEAV. Bet online, where the game starts.